Mark Rogers TV back with you to talk more college football. And of course, tonight is the night in which the Heisman Trophy was presented to Baker Mayfield, quarterback for the Oklahoma Sooners. I, in fact, completely forgot that the Heisman Trophy was tonight. I didn't watch 1 minute, 1 second of it. I was here, as you can see on my YouTube channel, shooting college football videos, talking to tons of bloggers and broadcasters all over the place, previewing bowl season mostly, and forgot about the Heisman Trophy. There was no reason to watch the ceremony unless, in particular, you're a fan of Bryce Love, Lamar Jackson, or Baker. Otherwise, this was a result that was determined weeks ago, and rightfully so. Baker Mayfield is maybe not the best player in the country, and let me explain before you jump all over me. I'm not saying he's not deserving of the Heisman. I would have voted for Baker Mayfield to win the Heisman. When people say the Heisman's given to the best player in the country, well, it's given to the best player playing for a really good team that plays a skill position. So you've got to play most likely quarterback, possibly running back, possibly wide receiver to win the Heisman Trophy. It's almost turned into a quarterback award, as we have seen in recent years. Since the passing game has eclipsed the running game, it was once a running back award. If you're a little bit younger and don't remember the 70s and the 80s in college football, go through those years of Heisman balloting, and a running back always won the Heisman Trophy. Charles White, Marcus Allen, Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, Billy Sims, Bo Jackson, Mike Rozier, on and on and on and on up through the 90s. And then the quarterbacks took over. And now it's a quarterback award. And there's a possibility that a running back in recent years, Mark Ingram, someone like that, Derrick Henry, can possibly win the Heisman Trophy, even though Christian McCaffrey should have won it 2 seasons ago. But Baker Mayfield won in a landslide. I have yet to look up the numbers to see if this was the biggest landslide of all time, which I can't recall offhand. I know Troy Smith of Ohio State in 2006 had one of the biggest vote margins in history. He had a dominant season, and I think still the closest race was between Chuck Long and Bo Jackson in 1985 when Bo Jackson won the Heisman. So Baker Mayfield, 732 first-place votes, well-deserved, did not play a bad game this year. Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy last year, and he had 2 awful games to conclude the season. Yes, he piled up a ton of yards, but he also piled up a ton of turnovers, especially in the Kentucky game. 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions. He may have had a 4th turnover with a fumble in that game. I was touting Deshaun Watson before the playoffs, of course, before the championship game, which would have only added to the argument, but it's a regular season award that Deshaun Watson was the best player in the nation despite the 15 interceptions and should have won the Heisman last year. But Baker Mayfield, by far, I don't know who voted for him 2nd or 3rd. I can understand the argument for Bryce Love to a certain extent. He was amazing in some of similar ways in which Christian McCaffrey was 2 years ago, although Bryce Love not nearly as versatile in the kick game and in the pass game as Christian McCaffrey. But to do what he did, and especially with the injury that he suffered down the stretch and getting his team to a Pac-12 championship game, but you got to give it to the most prolific player, and especially if he's a leader on the team, as Baker Mayfield is, and then his team on top of that wins a conference championship and gets to the college football playoff. Baker Mayfield didn't have a bad game this year. And again, if you go through each and every Heisman season, I would say that it's going to be difficult to find a player that was more consistent and more consistently exceptional every game than Baker Mayfield. Even in the Iowa State game, the one Sooner loss, he didn't play poorly in that game. Put up big numbers, put up 31, 34 points, something in that range. So I would have voted for Baker Mayfield. I think it was just a no-brainer, unless you take the integrity aspect to the nth degree. It is certainly written into the Heisman description that there is something involving evaluation of integrity and character. I don't think what he did was so awful that it would have taken him to a place where I would not have voted for him, but I can understand, and this may be the reason why some people voted him 2nd or 3rd. If you were going to take that stance, then you would completely leave him off the ballot. I don't know if that was done. Bryce Love finishes second, Lamar Jackson third. Interesting to note that Lamar Jackson probably having slightly, at least as a passer, a better season this year. He has the one more game to play, so you can't directly compare the 12-game stats this year versus 13 last year, although he did next to nothing against LSU in the bowl game and scoring 9 points, but he has just about 4 less rushing touchdowns. He's thrown less interceptions this year, has a higher completion percentage, but Louisville taken out of any kind of ACC contention or national playoff contention very early, so Lamar Jackson dropped right off the map. As did Saquon Barkley later in the season. Saquon Barkley was so exceptional in that road game at Iowa against a good defense, running for over 200 yards, catching passes, and then defenses started to focus on Saquon Barkley, and he had some very marginal outputs there mid-season, but was still staying in the playoff race before the loss to Ohio State. That's what did him in. Despite only running in several games for 65, 70 yards, he started to make his contributions in the pass game. He threw a touchdown pass. He provided a number of thrilling kickoff returns, especially in the Ohio State game as well, but Penn State lost twice. Barkley, not a factor down the stretch at all, as Penn State's probably the best team in the nation that's completely gone off people's radar because of losing the 2 games and not playing anyone of significance. Rashad Penny of San Diego State, interesting nomination there, of course. Always the difference has to be Wade of playing in the group of 5 and playing lesser competition. And that was the deal there. Jonathan Taylor of Wisconsin, what a freshman campaign he had. Largely handled and shut down in the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State, but that was by far his worst game of the year. He exploded on just about everybody else and had 2 first-place votes. I don't know that he could have factored into this, but imagine if Jonathan Taylor would have run for 250 yards against Ohio State and the Badgers would have won the Big Ten championship, finished undefeated as the only Power 5 undefeated team, and grabbed a college football playoff spot. Maybe Jonathan Taylor could have made this somewhat interesting and eclipsed Bryce Love and Lamar Jackson, I would think, although they got the invite a few weeks ago. Mason Rudolph, Oklahoma State, big numbers early on, huge game at Pitt, fell off with a loss to TCU in particular. Mackenzie Milton, got to see him play first snap to last snap, gun to gun the last 2 weeks against South Florida and Memphis in the American Conference Championship game, and this kid can play and light it up, and he got 4 first-place votes. That's what always I find interesting in looking at the Heisman votes, is because there's so many ballots cast. You're looking at like 900 ballots cast, is that you will see 3 and 4 votes for some unlikely players out there. Mackenzie Milton had an outstanding season, but imagine 4 people voted for Mackenzie Milton to win the Heisman Trophy over Baker Mayfield. And Mason Rudolph playing in the same conference as Baker Mayfield. There are 2 people out there that believe that Mason Rudolph had a better season than Baker Mayfield. That's odd. I can understand a different position thinking, okay, Bryce Love, Saquon Barkley, even Lamar Jackson because of what he does with his legs. But Mason Rudolph, Baker Mayfield, that's a direct comparison. And there were 2 folks out there that believed that Mason Rudolph had a better season than Baker Mayfield. It's kind of like voting for, in Major League Baseball, guys to win the Gold Glove that had the glove on their hand about 25 times and played DH the rest of the year. You see that happening from time to time. Those voters should have their vote taken away. Kerryon Johnson, great season for Auburn. He may have gotten a little bit more of a push had he had a big SEC championship game and the Auburn Tigers moved on to the playoff. Roquan Smith of Georgia, the highest ranked defensive player, with 3 votes coming from people that believe in defense and that a defensive player could win or should win the Heisman Trophy right there. So there's your top 10. I don't know if that's the complete list of everyone who received votes or that's strictly the top 10. But absent from those numbers, of course, thinking back preseason and who had the Heisman talk surrounding them in particular would have been Sam Darnold. But too many picks early in the season, too many turnovers, a very inconsistent campaign for Sam Darnold. Don't believe it's going to hurt his draft status. Teams need quarterbacks in the NFL, and they're looking for the big arm and the big talent, and Sam Darnold still delivers that. But when it comes to college play on the field this season, Sam Darnold delivered at times, but not all the time. And of course, the big loss to Notre Dame and getting knocked out of contention for the college football playoff hurt him. Josh Rosen had a nice season, but he's not on the top 10 list, and certainly a guy that we talked about preseason, as was J.T. Barrett of Ohio State. He probably wasn't the best candidate on his own team. J.K. Dobbins didn't get enough carries to warrant any Heisman consideration, but certainly will be on some lists preseason 2018. All right, those are the three names that come to mind that kind of drop off the map that we would have expected to be in the top 10 or the final 10 here the first week of December that we talked about going back to the summer before anybody played football. The SEC certainly lightly represented here, with Georgia's Roquan Smith at number 10, Kerryon Johnson of Auburn, the running back, at number 9. So the SEC did not place anyone in the top 8 of the balloting. The ACC a little bit more represented, at least at the top of the board, with Lamar Jackson getting the invite to New York City, but that's it for the ACC. Penn State representing the Big Ten, and also Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, Saquon Barkley with the Nittany Lions in the group of 5, of course. Get some play with San Diego State's Rashad Penny and also Central Florida's Mackenzie Milton. And so your thoughts about the Heisman Trophy? I think it's pretty cut and dry. Baker Mayfield, the best skill position player in the country, leading his team to a conference championship, college football playoff berth. No-brainer selection here. And he won in a runaway. 732 first-place votes to Bryce Love's 75, Lamar Jackson's 47, and Saquon Barkley's 15. Mark Rogers TV, always talking college football, and we talk it up for the smart fan. That would be you. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you will see us break down the bowl bids, the coaching hires and situations out there. A lot of talk surrounding Dan Mullen going to Florida. We've talked it up concerning Joe Moorhead moving in at Mississippi State, and of course the Chip Kelly situation at UCLA, new Arizona State coach Herm Edwards. We have talked it all over the place. Jeremy Pruitt going to Tennessee. So if you're into the coaching carousel and the coaching hires, we have analysis across the board of all the major coaching changes in college football. And of course, the games coming up, postseason play with the semifinals, and of course, 41 bowl games. So please join me right here on Mark Rogers TV. I love to see the comments and the questions, and I take part in as much as possible. And please join me for bowl season. But Baker Mayfield, congratulations, Heisman Trophy winner, Oklahoma 2017. See you next time.